Well, the NFC South has been all about the Bucs lately. For the fourth consecutive season, Tampa Bay, your division winners, advancing to the playoffs for a fifth straight year. That is the longest active streak by a team in the NFC. But some big changes coming to Tampa Bay this offseason. Most notably, they lost their offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, who is now in charge of the Jags right up the road there. And there's also questions about Chris Godwin, another key free agent to address. But there's no question when it comes to the dominance that the Bucs have had in this division over the last 4 years. They have won it 4 times. This division really just like a division of runs. The Saints won it 4 times previously to that, and then the Panthers had it 3 times in a row. But the Bucs right now are on top. Maybe some work to do going forward. Let's welcome in our NFL team, I almost said NBA team, of Bryant, McFadden, and John Breech to discuss what the NFC South can do to get a little better going into 2025. So, guys, let's start at the top with the champs. There's no more Liam Cohen. It's now Josh Grizzard's role over there at OC, and it seems like the biggest order of business there is to get Chris Godwin back. Breech, what do you think about the Bucs? How can they improve going into the offseason?
Yeah, that's obviously something that is on their radar. We already know they've kind of extended the deadline on his contract so they can get a deal done. If you look at Chris Godwin, meant to this offense, he played a huge part before he suffered that season-ending injury back in October. He had 50 catches for 576 yards. He was averaging over 80 yards per game. So he is obviously a key part of that offense, and you want to have him back when you're breaking in that new offensive coordinator. Baker Mayfield would love to have him back. But then the other side of this, the Buccaneers had a very prolific offense. What they didn't have was a defense that could stop the pass. So I think that's another part where the Bucs are going to have to focus. This team gave up the 4th most passing yards in the NFL last season. They didn't generate a lot of pass rush outside of Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. You look at their linebackers. We saw Levante David's about to be a free agent, so they could stand to add someone in the draft or free agency at the linebacker position. And even corners, they could probably use some depth there. So I think the Buccaneers, yes, you need Chris Godwin, but I think the focus for them probably needs to be adding some depth pieces on defense.
Yeah, Chris Godwin is the top priority for this team. When you look at their free agents, he's shown the ability, John, to come off season-ending injuries and still give you great sound production. This will be his 2nd injury that he had to miss the rest of the year, but he's been able to bounce back. And then you got to look at life after Mike Evans. Mike Evans is still putting up outstanding numbers, but you have to get prepared for life after Mike Evans because he's closer to the end of his career than the beginning. And Chris Godwin is clearly lockstep to be able to fill that wide receiver 1 option whenever Mike Evans decides to call it quits. And then you look at the defense, I'm right there with you. You know, trading away Carlton Davis, it seemed like it was a good move at the time, but they really missed him in terms of his lockdown potential and the depth. You know, Jamel Dean was the next best corner, but he missed a lot of time because of injuries. And they didn't have the necessary production to follow when you were missing Jamel Dean. So trying to add more depth in the secondary, especially the cornerback position, would be a big-time necessity for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
You know, despite those defensive deficiencies, the Bucs were the first team to start the year 4-6 and still reach the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. So I don't know, maybe the Bengals need to take some notes there when it comes to how the Bucs are finishing out the regular season. Let's talk about the Falcons, guys. You know, a year ago, we were talking about this big move. Kirk Cousins was going to take the top off of this Atlanta squad. And now we're talking about his replacement, Michael Penix, that era set to begin. B-Mac, what excites you about what the Falcons can do around Penix? And to take it a step further, how do they set him up for success this offseason?
Well, what excites me about this offense, they have the ability to be one of the more explosive offenses in the National Football League, starting with their quarterback in Michael Penix. I love Bijan Robertson. He has the ability to be and do it all back for their offense, an offensive weapon. I love unlocking Drake May. We saw what he did this season with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix. He is a bona fide wide receiver 1. You look at Darnell Mooney, became a big-time playmaker. Potentially adding more talent to the tight end room would be huge. And then when you factor in Michael Penix, I mean, John, he did a really, really good job stepping in for this team towards the latter part of 2024. And he didn't blink at all. The moment never seemed to be too big for him. And you have to be optimistic about Penix, knowing that he is QB1 to start this offseason process as he gets ready for the upcoming regular season. So he will get all the necessary reps to be at his best and to be most importantly comfortable for this offense moving forward. So you have to really like their chances in knowing the type of talent he has at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and B-Mac is absolutely right. You love the talent that the Falcons have around Michael Penix, whether that's Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts. So the offense is pretty stacked. They'll have to worry a little bit about the center position because Drew Dahlman's set to be a free agent. So that's a hole you're going to have to fill. Let's not forget, sometimes the best offense is a good defense. If you don't want Michael Penix being forced to go out there and win shootouts every week next season, you really have to fortify that defense. So the Falcons are going to have to make some moves during free agency, especially at pass. They need to add a pass rusher. This team had just 31 sacks last season. That was the second fewest in the NFL. We see Matt Judon. He's going to be a free agent. They have defensive tackles, Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata. Both those guys are over 30, so they're getting up there in age. They're both expensive. Maybe one or both of them become cap casualties. You look in the secondary, they probably could stand to add some cornerback depth. So I think as much as they're going to want to help Michael Penix, they're really going to need to focus on the defense. And one problem for the Falcons is they don't have a ton of money. So it's not like they can go on a huge spending spree in free agency. They're going to have to make smart moves, and they're also going to have to make smart draft picks because that's how you add players without spending a lot of money.
Well, I think Michael Penix was one of the biggest surprises of the draft when he was taken for the Falcons, and it paid off. 8th most passing yards in the NFL from week 16 to 18 as a starter. So if you like the Falcons offense, I think it's in pretty good hands there. Continuing our NFC South offseason conversation here, we head to Carolina, gentlemen, where Bryce Young is back behind center. It seems like they've locked up the backup plan just in case things kind of go awry again like they did last year. They signed Andy Dalton to that nice little extension. But Breech, when it comes to this Panthers team, we know that they need a lot of work. It's why we've kind of made them a little bit of a joke as the years have gone on here. How do we get them to be competitive with Bryce Young behind center, Breech?
How long do we have, Haley? Do I have 40 minutes to go through this? Because the Panthers have a lot of issues here. And we can start. We don't have to bring up Bryce Young right now. You look at the defense. They gave up the most yards per game in the NFL last season. They gave up the most points per game. They kind of need help at every single level, whether that is linebacker, whether that's secondary, whether that's at defensive tackle. The loss, getting rid of Brian Burns, obviously losing a huge talent there when trading him away. So the Panthers need a lot of help on defense. Now, if you look at their offense, you're probably feeling a little bit more optimistic, especially after Bryce Young rebounded following that week 3 benching. He came back. He looked better every single week. He seemed like he had a better understanding of Dave Canales' offense. And now Dave Canales is going to have a whole entire offseason to kind of develop that offense around Bryce Young's skill set. So you feel really good about that. And then you look at their offense, signing Chuba Hubbard to an extension was smart because he was such a key part of that. And I think if the Panthers are going to do one thing to help Bryce Young, they absolutely have to add a receiver. Adam Thielen's good. Xavier Legette is good. But I think you need at least one more playmaker in there to help Bryce Young. And I think that's one thing they need to do in free agency. But the Panthers offense does look like they're taking a few steps forward. And obviously Bryce Young looked much better at the end of the season. So I think they feel pretty good about where the offense is headed.
I also need them to set him up for success. Remember the video that went viral at training camp when he's got that big old backpack and he's walking in like he was like in his first day of school? I need them to make him look like he's not a teenager in those videos because that was really funny to see. Guys, let's wrap up our conversation here with the New Orleans Saints, where we know Kellen Moore is walking into problems left and right. They've got a really janky roster going on right now. Not sure who's going to be the quarterback next season. And guys, it's going to be tough to fix it given the limitations, I should say, they have with the cap. So B-Mac, when you look at Kellen Moore, first time as a head coach, tasked with recreating this Saints roster, how does he do it? Where do we even begin?
It's going to be a difficult situation for Kellen Moore because of the cap hell they're currently sitting in. You know, one of the more casual shows that I love to watch, Haley, John, is Lottery Dream Home. And that's a show that consists of individuals or a family that win a lottery to purchase their dream home. But the more confusing episodes that I watch are when you watch these individuals get their dream home and you look at the house and you're like, where did you spend the money? That's the New Orleans Saints. For them to be in a cap spot that they're currently sitting in, and you look at their roster, you look at their wins, where did you spend the money? You were 5-12 last year, and don't forget they started the season off 2-0. They flatlined tremendously throughout the rest of the way. And now it's almost like it's a rebuild situation, because to improve the roster, you have to find a way to finesse the cap hell you're in the midst of. Not to mention hitting on draft picks as well. So this is going to be a rebuild type situation for the New Orleans Saints, because number one, they don't have the financial resources that some of the other teams have to improve their roster. It'd be one thing, John Haley, if you looked at where they currently sit with a cap and you see nice wins, you see playoff appearances, but you haven't seen either or, and they have spent a lot of money in the wrong places. So if you're Kellen Moore, and most importantly, if you're the New Orleans Saints fan base, a very, very authentic, rabid fan base, you have to exercise patience with this situation under this new regime, because you got to get out of debt. They're in debt right now, so you got to find a way to get out of debt, pay those necessary bills off, and then find a way to go get some veteran players. And like I said, most importantly, hit on the draft. So this draft for Kellen Moore is very, very important, because they don't have the money they need to allocate to veteran players. So they got to do it the cheap route. And the last time I checked, we all love bargain deals. We're all a bargain shopper. So when you can find you a great item for less, you got to go run and get it, and let's see, can they do that throughout this entire draft coming up.
B-Max over here talking about bargain deals, and he's got the best CBS jacket on there, rocking it, that he's been wearing in every single hit I have seen. Guys, it is going to be an interesting offseason for sure. We know you guys will keep a close eye on it as the offseason officially begins. It all starts with the upcoming NFL Scouting Combine. That kicks off next week. Franchise tag and transition tag conversations will also begin before free agency ramps up in March. And then, of course, the NFL Draft, where the Titans have the #1 overall pick. That comes April 24th to the 26th.